Thank you very much, Cuihong, for your invitation, and hello everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to share our recent work in this IIOA webinar. And today I would like to talk about the allocation, the relocation of processing export. That is we try to identify the host country of processing export. This is joint work with my colleague Dr. Gao Xiang and also my students Zhao Yu and Jiang Qingyan. It's still we are still working on this issue. It's still ongoing work. Actually, our starting point is the statistics of China's trade share. This is the Chinese trade share. We could see that for a long time, the share of processing export of China is quite high, over 50%, in particular between 95 to 2007. But after that, in particular after the international financial crisis, the share of the processing export of China decreased gradually. Now, in the first half of this year, it's around 20%. The decrease of China's processing export is due to many reasons, many determinants. Of course, the policy issue is also one of the determinants of the decrease of Chinese processing export share. But actually, if we look at globally, we suppose that the share of Chinese processing export may be transferred to other countries and regions. This is another reason, due to the increase of the labor cost, due to the increase of other kinds of productive factors. Some of the multinational enterprises may transfer their investment to other countries. This is our analysis about the determinants of the share of Chinese processing export. So how and what kinds of relocation of the processing trade across the world globally in recent years? Actually, in the past several years, we try to figure out this kind of issue. If this is several chart of the share of Chinese trade in goods by industry and of the world total. The top on the left is the total trade in goods of China in terms of the shares of world total. We could see that from 2015, from the year 2015, it shows a downward trend in terms of the Chinese share of world total. If we look at the goods, the bulk goods of Chinese exports, we could see that iron and steel and integrated circuits and textile telecommunication equipment and electronic equipment. This is the large volume export from China. We could see that from the same year, it shows a similar trend. Although the rate is different, but still it shows a very similar trend. It's a downward trend. On the other hand, when we look at other economies, in particular Vietnam, we could see that from almost the same year, from 2015, it shows an upward trend in terms of the share of Vietnam's export in goods of world total. So when we look into the goods, like I just showed in the second slide, we could see that in particular in Vietnam, the iron and steel integrated circuits and textile and also telecommunication, the similar groups with I just showed for China. We could see that this shows another trend. It's an upward trend. It's upward trend in contrary to the downward trend of China's share in these goods. So we may suppose that this is just a coincidence, or we can say that the decrease of Chinese share has been shifted to Vietnam. We are very curious about this kind of phenomenon. Actually, for the past several years, our group have just focused on the global industrial relocation. We had a paper have been published that this is a world input output database based industrial relocation model. They can capture the industrial relocation by industry and by economy, while because more often we have some time lag of the publication of world input out tables. We cannot capture we effectively capture the global industrial relocation in particular in recent years, like for example after the COVID-19, the global industrial relocation may accelerate. And another side is the trade protectionism, because in the past several years the trade friction between China and the US for some circumstances it also affect the global industrial relocation triggered by the multinational enterprises. So in this case, it's not easy to capture the industrial relocation in recent years with the world input output tables. But there, like I just said, the industrial relocation has been accelerated due to the circumstances, or due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the retrospect of the supply chain and the production chain safety around the world. Actually, it's accelerated. But how to capture the acceleration of the industrial relocation in recent years? So we focused on the processing trade. Why focus on processing trade? Because actually processing trade has its own special characteristics. So for example, it's sensitive to production cost because it's triggered by the distribution around the world, triggered by the MAES and the multinational enterprises due to the comparative advantages. So it's more likely to relocate. This is one perspective. Another perspective is that the processing trade is more often heavily dependent on the international supply chain, and it's high sensitive to high sensitive to geopolitical and economic uncertainties. So from this perspective, processing trade is also easier to be relocated to other economies. So this is the second perspective. In the industrial relocation research, the processing trade is often considered as a bellwether of global production relocation due to the above perspectives. It's sensitive to production cost. It's sensitive to geopolitical and economic uncertainties in other countries. So this is a very good starting point to capture the industrial relocation in recent years, in particular affected by emergent events, like for example, with some the geopolitical conflicts and the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is why we focused on the industrial relocation of processing trade. When we look at the industrial relocation of processing trade, actually we have several points. The first point is that the domestic value added share, because in the past more than 20 years, we have been focused on the domestic value added measurement of exports, in particular the processing exports, starting from China's case. The domestic value added share of processing trade is lower is lower than normal trade and domestic demand because it's highly dependent on imported intermediate inputs. So this is the one fact for the processing export. So in this case, we have an hypothesis that is that if the domestic value-added share of the gross exports continually decreases for a specific economy, but on the other hand, its export increase at the same time. This is 2 points. One point is that the domestic value-added share of gross exports continually decreases. Another side is the export increases at the same time. It means that such economy may be the destination of processing trade relocation. So this is based on the low domestic value-added share of processing export, and also its share in the total export. We put forward this kind of hypothesis. This table is about the case of China. We could see that the processing export in terms of the domestic value added is much lower than normal trade and gross trade, and of course the activities for domestic demand. So this is the several points. And based on this, we have done the following issue. We have done the following work. The one is that we put forward an idea based on the facts, how to identify whether or not a certain economy is the host economy of processing trade based on the changes of domestic value added of the gross exports of the gross exports. And based on these kinds of facts and you know the target, we proposed an optimization method-based model for estimating the evaluation of domestic value-added share of gross export. Why we use an optimization method? Due to the fact that although several other countries, in particular developing countries, they have a lot of processing trade activities, but they do not have the routine statistics. Like China, we have the routine statistics for processing export, but for many other countries, they may not have the data of processing export. So if we would like to capture the domestic value-added share of processing export, it's not easy because we have no data. This is why we ask the help of optimization method. So this is the major motivation. Another issue is that we will usually, when we estimate the domestic value added share of export of other final demands, we often refer to the input-output tables. But as I just said, the input-output tables often we have a time lag. We cannot capture in most recent years. This is one drawback. Another is that many developing countries, they may not have most recent input-output tables. So our theoretical foundation is that this table. I think most of you are quite familiar with this table. This is the competitive input output table. Our theoretical foundation is that we use the GDP by expenditure method, measured by expenditure method. So this is the GDP, and when we define when we define this is total value added coefficient, and this is the final demand, consumption, capital formation, and exports. Our basic idea is that we would like to identify the value added, the total value added coefficients of each final demand, So thus we define this is the structure, the share of consumption, the share of investment or capital formation, the share of export, and C, IN, and X is the total consumption, total capital formation, and total exports. And then, based on this definition, based on these formulas, based on these indicators, we could calculate, the total value added coefficients of consumption and the total value added coefficients of investment and exports. And that if we just denote alpha is equal to BV multiplied CS, we could see that alpha is the total value added coefficients of consumption, and beta is set for investment, and gamma is that for exports. Actually, we would like to capture the evolution of gamma. If the gamma, the total value added coefficients of export decreases, and at the same time if export increases, we would judge that this economy may be the destination of processing export. So we would like to capture the evolution of gamma. But here, as I just said, we would like to we would like to identify the host of post-processing economies. But here in this table, the processing export is hidden somewhere because we cannot, there's no distinguish between processing export and non-processing export. So let's ask the help to another tables. This table is our work where we have been focusing on for the past more than 20 years. Okay, this is from the China's case. We distinguish the China's production activity into three types. The one type is processing trade, another type is non-processing trade, and another type, the third type is production for domestic enterprises, for domestic demand. And from this table, we can make a distinction of exports of export from processing trade, or of exports from non-processing trade. So thus it's possible when we can rewrite, the formula 5, that is, alpha C plus beta investment and plus gamma export. We can rewrite this part. We can rewrite this part, make a distinction of processing trade and non-processing trade. And though this one is the processing export, and this one XN is non-processing export, and the BVP, BVN is respectively the total value added coefficients of export, processing export, and non-processing export. Similarly, we also define, the export, the share of processing export, and also the share of non-processing export. And then we put these shares into the formula. We can get similarly, this is non-processing. This is a total value added coefficients of non-processing export, and this is that of processing export. Finally, we can get the new gamma. This is the weighted average. The new gamma is a weighted average of processing export and non-processing export. And this is total value added coefficient of non-processing export, and this is that of processing export. So this is our starting point, and later on we will estimate the evolution of gamma, the evolution of alpha and beta, but we mainly focus on the evolution of gamma and across the years, how it changed. Actually, the domestic value added share of gross export mainly is determined by three kinds of factors. The one factor is that the proportion of the processing export in the gross export. Since I just mentioned that the domestic value added of processing export is much lower than other types. If the proportion of the processing export in the gross exports increased, it may cause the decrease of domestic value added share, and we may judge, we may say that if it may be the destination of industrial relocation in terms of processing export. Another factor is the total value added coefficients of processing export and also the non-processing export. If the total value, if BVP and BVN are decreased, it means it means that it will have a higher dependence on imported intermediate goods. And another factor actually is the sector shares within processing export and non-processing export. If the shares across the sectors creating a lower total value added, it means that the competitive advantage is focusing on this concentrating this kinds of sectors. What kind of sectors? The sectors with lower value added. So in this case, it may mean that their dependence on the international supply chain increased. And for the low-cost developing economies, it may be the destination of processing trade. So this is the several determinants of domestic value added share of gross exports. And later on, we will estimate based on the optimization model. We will estimate the gamma. Okay, this is the facts. This is the findings from China's case, from China's data. The upper two lines, the dark blue, and the orange lines is domestic value added share of consumption, of final consumption, and also capital formation. We could see that across years, from 2002 and 2018, across the years, it remains almost, the variation is very little. So it's almost stable across the years. But when we look at the domestic value added share of gross exports, the light blue one from 2002 to 2018, it went up. But at the same time, we could see the dashed green line. The dashed green line is the share of processing export of China's total export. We could see that these two lines is contrary to each other. That is that the higher the share of processing export, and the lower the domestic value added share of the exports. So this is the facts from China's data set. And actually, we have some preparations before constructing the optimization models. The continually decreasing domestic value added share of gross exports actually is a sufficient condition for becoming the host economy of processing production, in particular for those low-cost developing countries and regions. And in the mainstream approach, when we would like to estimate the TIVA indicators, we mainly refer to the input-out tables, tables. But as I just mentioned that, in particular, if we would like to capture the most recent years, it's not possible to use what the input-out tables due to the time lag. And another issue is that there are not sufficient data of processing export for some developing countries. So if we use the general IO table, we may overestimate the domestic value added share of gross exports. So this is the some of the points before we propose the table, the optimization model. And we proposed a model, a constrained weighted least square optimization model to capture the evolution of domestic value added share of gross exports. And this is, the constraints. The constraints is the GDP by expenditure approach, and the objective function. Actually, we have several basic requirements. Let's just briefly introduce the variables. Here alpha 0 bar is the reference value. We have initial values. For the initial value, we have to ask the help of the input of the tables, because it's just the initial value. It's not necessarily the most recent years. But after alpha t and alpha t t minus 1 is the errors between two different years. Between two different years, we ask it to be minimized, and this is for the consumption, and for the investment, and for the export, Alpha t, beta t, and gamma t are unknown variables we need to solve from the optimization model. Actually, we have some intuition and also have some basic assumptions. That's one intuition is that their value at the start year would be as close to the reference value as possible, as close as possible to the reference value. This is one condition. Another is that their value at adjacent years would also be close as possible. But the basic assumption is that the variation of domestic value added share of each specific final demand, that is consumption, investment, between two close years to adjacent years should be slight and smooth, as we have seen from the consumption and also the capital formation of China. Another is that the variation of domestic value added share of gross export is wider than that of the others, controlled by weights. We also have some procedures to estimate the weights. So this is the model. This is the basic optimization model to estimate the alpha t, beta t, and also gamma t. And for the data set, we calculated we selected 19 economies. The basic criterion to choose the economies is that one major thing is the data availability. This is one constraint. Another constraint is that we mainly focus on the developing economies, who may be the destination of processing trade. Finally, we have 19 economies: Asia, Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and the Philippines, Vietnam, and also from 3 countries from South America: Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and also 3 economies from East Europe: Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and also Middle East and Africa, and that is Morocco, Tunisia, and Turkey. The data sources is that several kinds of data sources. One source is national counting data, because national counting data actually we could have the data in most recent years, like for example last year, the consumption, fixed capital formation, etc. This is captured. This is from the World Bank. Another is that the import of consumption goods and capital goods, because we have to calculate the domestic value added. There is a distinction between domestic consumption, and also imported consumption, and also the initial values. I just mentioned that alpha 0 is beta 0 is the initial values. We have to calculate from the word input output tables. We can get the tables from different data sets like OECD, ICIO, and also from some of the economies is from ADB, Asia Development Bank. The period, the years of data is from 2008 and 2020. Use this kind of data set and other optimization method. Our results is listed as follows. We could see that Vietnam, where it shows except for the years of 2008 and 2009, actually it's the flyer years data, because this is the year of international financial crisis years. And from the 2010, we could see that it shows a very clear downward trend. And other economies, like for example, Colombia, Philippines, and Tunisia, shows very similar trend in terms of their domestic share, value-added share of gross exports. But this is this is observation from the data. We can also use some clustering techniques to group the economies who may be the destination of industrial relocation of processing exports. And this is the data of this is the estimation of the Vietnam. We could say that the data from the left-hand side is their real data. We could see that the green one, we could see that their exports increased quite rapidly, and the data, the chart on the right-hand side is our estimation. It's the estimated results. We could say that this is the dark blue line is domestic value-added share of gross exports. We could see that 2 points. The domestic value-added share of gross exports decrease gradually, and exports, the gross exports increase rapidly. So this is just consistent with what we just mentioned right before the construction of the model. So we could say that the Vietnam is the host economy of the processing production. This is very clear, results for its destination of processing export. And later on, we use clustering techniques to group, to search other countries and regions who are similar to the situation of Vietnam. And firstly, we just grouped 5 economies besides Vietnam, and also Turkey, Tunisia, Philippines, and Colombia. These 5 economies may be the host country of processing export. But for the data of 2008 and 2009, it's quite it's not gradual, it's not consistent with other years, because it's the years of global financial crisis. So next we just delete the data of 2008 and 2009, and we have a new group. This group is, we can see that Turkey is not there, and we can see that Tunisia, Philippines, and Colombia is similar, shows very, very similar results with Vietnam. So we suppose that these 4 economies maybe the host of processing trade. I think this is still ongoing work. We are still refining the process, and also we are making some sensitivity analysis and robustness check. This is preliminary results. I think this is all what I would like to introduce our work. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Yang. This is an excellent piece. Very interesting. Extension of the IO model, and also the applications. So now we stop recording. So we are entering the